friends, this is the Cryptonian taking a look at Bitcoin. Bitcoin is currently 28,920. You can see here that we're bouncing a little bit here off of this fib level 28,720 right here. And before we get into Bitcoin, I'm also going to take a look at AAVE. We have a viewer request from Jose, so we will take a look at AAVE. Just need to take a look at Bitcoin briefly here and a few pieces of news. So that being said, Bitcoin is down 1%, AAVE down 3.3%. And so when we take a look at the 4 hour, we see that we did have a consolidation here in the form of a what's called a bear flag. This bear flag is below the 50, is below the 200, and so officially on the 4 hour we are bearish for Bitcoin, and so the bias is to the downside. Now that being said, the RSI is 37. We are getting to a point where we could see maybe some kind of a bounce, but usually what happens is we see these kind of go sideways slightly up and then get rejected again, right? Until we put in some kind of stronger support. But that being said, we did have the breakdown from the bear flag here. And then the target on that is down here to the 28,500. We're not there yet. We could get there eventually, but like I said, it's a little bit slow going with Bitcoin. Bitcoin right now has a lack of participation, right? And we can see that just this slow decline, this slow grinding price action to the downside. Now we do have significant volume here on the 4 hour, but when we go to the daily, it's not as prominent as it has been in the past. So when we take a look at the volume on the daily, we're just low here, right? We did have volume up here before, and now we're, down here. So on the daily, it's not as significant. And on the daily, we have a RSI of 39. EMA is bearish. We did get a S2 signal here on the daily, significant, verifying that we are in a downtrend, a correction, which it's not surprising, right? Because Bitcoin's been going up for many weeks, seeing about 100% increase from the bottom. And so nothing goes up forever. People want to get paid, take profits, et cetera, et cetera. So um, could we see more downside price action for Bitcoin? I think so. The reason is because we just lost the 50, just lost the 50, and the next Fibonacci is down here at 28,300, right? Which is kind of where this bear flag target is in that general area. Another reason is see this gap in the volume nodes. The majority of the volume was traded down here, right? So there's more support down here than there is up here where this gap is, okay? So I do think that we could have more downside. It looks like we're just getting started on the daily, and so we need to be aware that there is increased risk to the downside in the short to midterm on the daily chart. And that 28,300, if that doesn't hold, and it's possible that that may not hold, then we're looking at this area down here where the lower boundary of the channel is. Things really will get ugly if we lose that 27,500 area. 27,500 is below the channel support, and it's at this fib line here. So that being said, we would still have support at the 200, still be above the 200. So we are bullish as far as the macro structure goes at this time. However, there is risk to the downside in this area, this gap, and down to this node here, 27,500, and possibly a little bit lower to meet the 200. So that being said, what does that mean for AAVE? Well, that means the same thing for AAVE as it does the rest of the market, as long as Bitcoin is going down, AAVE is going to be affected in a negative way as well. The market follows Bitcoin. When Bitcoin goes down, the market will go down with Bitcoin as well, and that includes AAVE. So, um, taking a look at AAVE here, let's see what we can see. hmm Okay, so right now here on the daily we see, well, first of all, let's go to the 4 hour. Interesting. Okay, so the 4 hours actually hitting an RSI of 23. So that's pretty low on the RSI. So we could see some kind of a consolidation here. And then if Bitcoin does go up, could see AAVE maybe test the 67 area. And but we're getting ready to see a crossover, a death cross, bearish cross of the 50 and the 200 on the 4 hour. So that's looking somewhat bearish. We are under an S2. And then once we had that S2 signal, we went a little bit further. So, yeah, so this is the area here that I said that we were seeing a little bit of support come in. And as long as we were above the 65, excuse me, 69.25, this yellow line, as long as we were above that, then we were okay and we could have a push to the upside. But that was dependent upon Bitcoin moving sideways or going higher, and Bitcoin didn't do that. Bitcoin actually broke down in price. So that's what's bringing the rest of the market down with AVE included. So yeah, so we could see a bounce, but I think any type of bounce, unless unless Bitcoin has a big move to the upside, a recovery, I think this bounce up to 69.25, which is now resistance, or the 67.87, this is going to be resistance. This is what's called a throwback. Unless Bitcoin does have a somewhat impressive recovery, AVE would depend on Bitcoin for some type of recovery, move to the upside. So I just don't see that happening right now. So I do think AVE could possibly go up to this level and then see some type of a rejection. This would be what's called a throwback. Once one, once the support is broken, quite often we see a move back up to retest it and get rejected from it. That's what's called a throwback, and then we continue to the downside. So in the short term, there is possibly some type of a bounce recovery, but as long as Bitcoin is in a downtrend, then I think that it's really not going to be a significant push to the upside, right? So short-term play, you might want to, take a position for short-term, but long-term investors, no, this is not the time for that. So taking a look at the daily, now the daily RSI is 36, so we're getting lower on the daily. EMA is bearish and the DMA is bearish. Now, what's significant is we are seeing an S2 on the daily, right? This is more significant because it's occurring on the daily. So the S2 is a confirmation of a downtrend on the daily chart here. So this is significant. So expect more downside pressure. Possible move to the $56, $57 area. And the reason for that is because Bitcoin has more downside to go, I think. Also, we're in August. August is usually slow. And we're seeing a cycle of negative articles, right? FUD in the market, negative sentiment in news articles, right? So, and remember I said for the last, I don't know how many videos, that volume was low for Bitcoin, volume was, really low. And so we're kind of in this like slow motion breakdown, right? It's not, going fast like some type of real big sell off. It's just this slow grind. People are disinterested. Not a lot of selling, but there's no buying either, right? So, and that's what this article says. Bitcoin volume hits lowest since early 2021 amid fear of 25K may return. And so, there's FUD, in the market. However, listen, listen, be very careful here because a lot of times what you see is like in August and these corrections, you'll see a lot of FUD. But here are some things to look out for. Number one, the Bitcoin ETF. If there is a Bitcoin ETF that gets approved, that's going to be pretty bullish, right? Also, it says here US crypto bills on the move. And we do have some crypto legislation that's being passed through the House. And so that could provide some clarity and some relief from the SEC and all the regulatory actions taking place. But also, excuse me, also I think that what is causing some short term fear in the market is that uh, the SEC is still pushing to attack, Coinbase and suing them, and also Hart with his Hex coin and his Pulse chain and things like that. So I think he's the one for Pulse chain. I don't know. I don't follow that, but there are, like I said, some trends and some cycles of bearish FUD news going on, and so once that takes hold, that's usually what we see in a correction or some type of cycle low, cycle bottom, right? That kind of thing. So that's just something to be paying attention to. Now, in the long term, we're bullish, right? If you take a look at Bitcoin in the long term, this, or should I say, the macro trend, right? This macro trend, whoops, let me take my marker off and take a look at the chart here. So the macro trend here is it's bullish. It's bullish. We don't get bearish until we actually break the 200, which is down here. So we have a little ways to go on Bitcoin. Could it happen? Yeah, I mean, it could happen. I mean, we just tested the 200 here, and we didn't have a real big push to the upside compared to the prior impulse to the upside, right? And when you take a look at this chart, you can see that we have three impulses to the upside, or five impulses, three to the upside and two to the downside, right? So we have this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then there's usually a correction that takes place, and so we could see the 200 tested again. It's August. Things are getting slow. I don't think things will pick up until probably, you know, the end of this year. So it's just kind of the way the cycles run. And so what does that mean for AAVE? Well, that means for AAVE, what that means for AAVE is, in my opinion now, this is not investment advice, this is just my opinion and what I've seen in the markets in the past and what maybe I can maybe infer from that moving forward. Again, not investment advice. So possibly coming down to this area here, which would be 0.65 is 55, $56, or excuse me, 0.68 fib, and that's going to be your golden pocket. Okay. Now, the lower end of this area is 53, even 50, right? Because this is where we bounced before. Now we have to hold that 55, 50 to 55 area. If we lose that, it's going to get ugly for AAVE. But I'm expecting us to come down to this 56, 57 area and put in a little bit of support, I think, or try to anyway. So that being said, that's going to be a point of interest that I'm looking at. But I do expect the rest of August to be slow, and I do expect the FUD machine, the negative cycle of news, to continue for a little while here. But towards the end of the year, possibly a BTC ETF getting approved. Once that gets approved, I think that'll make a big difference. And of course, crypto legislation is slowly but is moving through the government, through the House, and all that. So, um, in my opinion, it's time to be patient. And during these times, it's a time to you can dollar cost average. Although I wouldn't do it right now. I'd wait for Bitcoin to kind of settle and figure out where it's going to come in and consolidate on a daily basis. And then that'll give us an idea of where AAVE and other altcoins are at that time. So I think that's just kind of where we're at. We're in a correction, not a big deal yet. The correction for Bitcoin is pretty much expected. We're under the 50, right? But we're still above the 200, so technically we're bullish. And then taking a look at AAVE, the problem with AAVE is we couldn't hold that 69.25 area, and so we're getting a new S2 signal, which is confirmation of a downtrend on the daily. This is significant, so I think we will push down to these lower levels, like I discussed. And the 50 is under the 200 on the daily, so we didn't have a chance to flip it bullish, officially bullish on the daily, but and because of that, I think we're going to be coming down to these lower levels at the 55, probably around 55 area. So that being said, that's pretty much about it for now. It's just a quick update. I hope that's helpful, Jose. I know you had a question on AAVE. The price point that I would be looking at is one more leg down at 55, 56 area down here. And that's because I think Bitcoin has a little bit farther to go to the downside, right? Um, yeah. So, and we're just entering into a, uh, a correction with an S2 signal on the daily. And so that's very significant. So AAVE is looking for more downside. Bitcoin, more downside. Now, another thing too is the Nasdaq. We need to be careful. I'm going to take a look at the Nasdaq really quick. The Nasdaq on the indices here uh, is getting to a point where it's overheated, and the Nasdaq could take a pull back. We see here that we're seeing red circles at the top here. All of this is overbought. All of this is extended moves to the upside and overbought, meaning it's expensive in relative terms. So we could see if we start to turn down here, where I think we will eventually, that's going to affect Bitcoin, that's going to affect the crypto market. And so I think this is another reason why a lot of buyers are on the sidelines right now is they want to see what happens with the Nasdaq. They want the Nasdaq to correct. That's going to take some time too, right? It's going to take some time throughout August to correct. And when you take a look at this price and where it corrected here, we're not far from that point. We're not far from that big resistance area, right? We're right here. So this is where we're at, right here. So again, I think that the Nasdaq probably will have some kind of correction moving into these few months. That's going to create flat Bitcoin. That's going to create flat altcoins, including AAVE. And so it's just we just have to kind of sit through this cycle where it gets slow, probably grinds to the downside, um, and not a lot of strength. The market will get weak, the market will get slow until the end of the year, right? So I hope that helps, Jose. I hope you're doing well. Hope everyone's had a good weekend. And yeah, that's pretty much about it for now. Keep your eye on Bitcoin. I do think that Bitcoin has a little bit lower to go on the daily, and that's going to continue to put downside pressure on the market and altcoins. Any questions, please comment below. Please give the video a like. Don't forget this is